Hi, it's Yasmin Boland here, and today I want to talk about the top 10 things you probably don't know about astrology. The first thing I want to talk about is that all is not necessarily lost if you don't know your time of birth. When you go and see an astrologer, in order to cast your horoscope properly, in order to cast your birth chart, they'll ask you your time, date and place of birth. Now, a lot of people think if they don't know their time of birth, they can't get their chart done. It's actually not true. There are 3 quite good ways to find out your time of birth. The first is quite obvious, but not everyone thinks of it. Ring up the hospital or have a look on your birth certificate. Quite often there are records. Number 2, go and see what's called a rectification astrologer. Rectification astrologers use special software and work backwards through all the most important events in your life. For example, when you got married, when you got divorced, when you went to school, for example, when you had children, when you got a big promotion, when you went on a big travel experience, anything like that will show up in your chart, and working backwards they can often find out your time of birth. And the third way is to go and see a kinesiologist. A kinesiologist will muscle test you. It works on the theory that on some level your body knows what time you were born. So obviously a very interesting thing to do. If you can't get the records with a birth certificate or asking your mother or ringing up the hospital, often getting a rectification and kinesiology is interesting to see if they match up. The second thing that a lot of people don't know about astrology is that the astrology you read in papers and magazines is really good for a quick fix, but when an astrologer does your actual chart, he or she will take into account 10 planets at least in your chart. Okay, so a lot of people read horoscopes that people like me write, and they think, oh, how can astrology apply to 1/12 of all the people in the world? Well, in fact, astrology does actually work in horoscopes because we look at your sun and we look at rulership, but that's another story. What I want to explain today is if you go and get your chart done properly, you'll actually find that astrologers look not just at your sun but also your moon, your rising sign, your Mercury, which is how you communicate, your Venus planet, which is your love planet, and your abundance planet, your Mars planet, which is sex, and your drive, and all sorts of other things in your chart. So astrology in the papers is great fun, and as I said, great for a quick fix, but there's a lot more to astrology than what you read in the papers or in magazines or, of course, these days on the internet. The third thing a lot of people don't know about astrology is that your chart is very much unique to you this lifetime, okay? So your chart, your horoscope chart that an astrologer would read is based on your time, date and place of birth. So if you were born at a moment in time and someone was born at the exact same moment on the other side of the world, they would have a different chart from you because the place of birth is also important when casting the chart. But more than that, the planets in your chart, the configuration, the pattern that you see in there will not actually repeat for 26,000 years, okay? So that's how long it is until the planets are back in exactly the same place that they were at the moment that you were born. Therefore, your chart is extremely unique. Now, number 4, I actually just touched on a little bit, but I'll give a little bit more information. Your rising sign, a lot of people don't know what the rising sign is. It's actually the mask we wear. So it's the mask we wear socially, for example. So when we walk into a party or we go to a job interview and we have our our mask on that we wear when we go out in public, that is the rising sign. But what you might also not know is how it's cast. Well, I gave it away a minute ago a bit. It's based on the time and date and place of birth. As I said, if you were born in exactly the same moment, miles and miles away from someone else, you will have a different rising sign. Now, the rising sign dictates all the rest of the things which follow in the chart, so you will in fact have quite different charts. Number 5, there's nothing inherently good or bad about your chart. It's actually just all the opportunities and challenges that you are facing this lifetime. A lot of people think, oh no, I've got this terrible Venus square Saturn in my chart or whatever, and that means I'm doomed when it comes to love and romance for the rest of my life. Not so. In fact, all that's telling you, whatever aspects you have in your chart which are difficult, are actually just showing you what your challenges are this lifetime. You'll also find with the easy aspects what your blessings and what your assets are and where your opportunities lie this lifetime. Number 6, Something you may not know, your birth chart is actually a map of the heavens at the moment that you were born. So when you see a birth chart for the first time, it can look quite mysterious with all the squiggles and lines all over it. It's actually a map of the heavens, of the planets at the moment that you were born, taken from a picture, for example, like a picture taken from the place that you were born. So at the moment that you were being born, if somebody had laid down outside at that exact moment, around about that exact same place, and looked up at the skies with a telescope, these are where the planets were. This is a map of where those planets were at the moment of your birth. Number 7, another very little known fact, even by some astrologers, is that horoscopes have been around for thousands of years. Well, that's what evidence shows us. A lot of historic evidence about astrology has been lost in the annals of time, but there are people doing a lot of research, people like Robert Hand leading the way, and it seems to be that horoscopes have been around for literally thousands of years. We've been drawing up horoscopes and telling people their astrological predictions based on horoscopes for thousands of years. A lot of people think it started with a newspaper in the last century. Not the case. Horoscope astrology appears to have been around for thousands and thousands of years. Number 8, Pluto was demoted to being a dwarf planet, and astrologers all went crazy. Oh no, they didn't. A lot of people think that when Pluto got demoted to being a dwarf planet, we astrologers cared terribly. We didn't care at all. For one thing, we often don't agree with astronomers anyway. Astrologers and astronomers seem to butt heads quite a lot, which is kind of a shame because we could do a lot of really great work if we worked together. And also, back in the day, pre the so-called Age of Enlightenment, in fact, if you were an astrologer, you were also an astronomer. And if you were an astronomer, you were also an astrologer. Chances were very, very high. Now we don't work together, unfortunately. Some astronomers are nice to astrologers and, for example, will note down the time when a planet is discovered or something like that, because we know we're going to ask that. They know that we're going to ask them what question. But the point I really want to make here is that when Pluto was demoted to being a dwarf planet, it was at about 3 o'clock in the morning at an astronomy conference, and there was this like secret vote, and we all woke up and Pluto was no longer a planet, it was a dwarf planet. Astronomers might have felt that they'd done something great. Astrologers didn't really mind for the simple reason that Pluto is the planet of subterfuge anyway. It's the planet of stealth. And the fact that it got demoted actually suits its purposes, because Pluto doesn't really want to be, Pluto wants to be under the radar. So being demoted to being a dwarf planet actually suits Pluto's purposes very well, and in fact works really, really well with its astrological symbolism. Number 9, a really common one, this one. A lot of people think if they're born on the cusp of a sign, so just as the sun moved from one sign to another, they think they're a bit of both. So they might be born, say, on the cusp of Aries and Taurus, and they'll say, yes, and I'm a bit Aries and I'm a bit Taurus. No, wrong. In fact, you are one or the other. Now, what people don't understand until they learn astrology is that the sun does not change signs on exactly the same day every year. So, for example, someone born on, say, for example, November 22, might think they're a Scorpio, but depending on what year they were born, they could be a Scorpio or a Sagittarius, okay? The dates of the changeover are generally between the 19th and the 22nd. So if you're born on the 19th to the 22nd of any month, it's really worth getting a computer-generated birth chart, because if you look at a book, it can't really tell you. You have to put the time, date and place of birth in, and you will find out if you are one sign or the other, and you're not going to be a little bit of both. Number 10, the last thing that a lot of people don't necessarily know about astrology is why, if they feel they're not really like their sign, it can be because they have lots and lots of planets in one sign and their sun in another. The example that always springs to mind for me is Brad Pitt, gorgeous Brad Pitt. So he is in theory a Sagittarius, okay? Happy-go-lucky, wild, crazy, adventurous. But if you look at his chart, nearly all his other planets are in Capricorn, which is why he has his very serious side, why he was very much the family man, why he was very much about building his career, and he's made a big success of his business, and why he's into architecture, amongst other things. He's actually got a lot of Capricorn in his chart. So even though he is so-called a Sagittarian, in fact, he's way more of a Capricorn if you look at his actual birth chart with all the planets listed there. So it might be interesting for you to do your chart and find out where most of your planets are. So, and that will help you understand yourself better, why you are the way you are. So that, just to sum it up again, you may be a certain particular star sign or sun sign, as astrologers call it. You may be a star sign, but you may have all your other planets in another sign. So that is why sometimes you feel, well, there's a lot more to me than just my star sign. Well, astrologers couldn't agree more. We're always saying that you are more than just your star sign.